I spent Mother's Day completely alone, while my children went off to a friend's party, even though I had confirmed with them the day before that they would be coming to brunch, and they had both said yes. I cried the entire afternoon in the empty living room, but that very night they returned, asking for money to pay their bills. What they didn't know was that I had already bought my one-way ticket, and that changed everything. The table had been set since 11 o'clock in the morning. Clean linens, the good china I only brought out for special occasions, the cloth napkins I had ironed the night before. In the center, a modest arrangement of flowers I bought with the last few dollars left from my Social Security check. The chicken was in the oven, the potatoes peeled, the salad prepared, everything ready for Mother's Day brunch. I confirmed with them the day before. I called Tanisha first. She answered in a rush, like always, with that tone of voice she used when she was multitasking while talking to me. I asked if they were coming tomorrow. She said, "Yes, Mama, of course we'll be there." Then I called Malik. He was more direct. "Yeah, Ma, we're coming. Don't worry about it." He hung up fast. I was relieved. I thought that this time would be different. I thought that this time they would remember. I settled onto the living room sofa and waited. I looked at the clock at 12 o'clock. Nothing. By 12:30, I started to feel that familiar knot in my stomach. At 1 o'clock sharp, the chicken was ready. I took it out of the oven. The smell filled the empty house. I set the table and sat down. I waited a little longer. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I dialed Tanisha's number. No answer. I tried Malik. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. Nothing. The chicken was getting cold. The potatoes, too. I got up and walked to the window. The street was quiet. Some families passed by, walking, laughing, mothers with their children, flowers in their hands, hugs. I returned to the table. I sat alone across from all those empty plates. Then I understood. They weren't coming again. Not this year, just like last year, just like my birthday, just like Christmas. They always had an excuse, always something more important than me. I stayed seated there for I don't know how long. The clock ticked to 3, then 4, then 5. The evening light began to shift. The shadows stretched longer in the room. Everything was so silent that I could hear my own breathing. I could hear the sound of my heart breaking once more. At 6 o'clock in the evening, I got up and put the food in the fridge. No one was going to eat it. I cleared the dishes, folded the linens, put away the napkins, and tossed the flowers in the trash. They were wilted anyway, just like me. I sat back down on the sofa, and that's when the tears started to fall. They weren't loud tears, they weren't dramatic sobs. They were silent tears, the kind that hurt the most because they come from deep inside, from the place where you keep all the disappointments you don't want to admit, the place where you know the truth but prefer to pretend it doesn't exist. I cried, thinking about all the Mother's Days I'd spent alone. I cried, thinking about all the times they had promised to come and didn't. I cried, thinking that I had given my whole life for them, and they couldn't give me even one afternoon. I'm 70 years old. 70 years of life. 48 years of being a mother. And that day, in that empty room, I realized something I had been denying for a long time. My children didn't love me, or maybe they did love me, but not enough. Not enough to remember, not enough to be present, not enough to care. Night fell, and I was still there, unmoving, without turning on the lights. Just me, the darkness, and that weight on my chest that I didn't know how to remove anymore. I thought about calling them again. I thought about sending them a text. I thought about telling them how I felt. But I didn't, because I knew they would say the same old thing. "Sorry, Mama. Things got complicated. Next time." Always the next time, which never came. It was almost 10 o'clock at night when I heard the car pull up outside. I recognized the engine's sound. It was Malik's. Then I heard voices, laughter, footsteps in the yard, the key in the lock, the door opening. They flipped on the living room light and saw me sitting there in the dark, with swollen eyes, my soul shattered. Tanisha was the first to speak. "Hey, Mama, we just thought we'd stop by." She was wearing a fancy dress, her makeup perfect. She smelled of expensive perfume and alcohol. Malik came in behind her. He was also dressed up, new shirt, shiny shoes. He looked at me with that casual smile he used when he wanted something. "Hey, Ma, how was your day?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. I had a knot in my throat that kept me from speaking. I looked at them and saw everything. I saw the truth I had been avoiding. They had been at a party, having fun, drinking, laughing, while I was crying alone in this empty room. Tanisha sat down in the armchair across from me. Malik remained standing. There was an uncomfortable silence. Then Tanisha pulled out her phone, looked at the screen, and looked back at me. "Mama, we need to talk about something important." Malik approached and sat on the arm of the sofa. "Yeah, Ma, we have a problem. We need you to help us." Tanisha nodded. "It's urgent, Mama. It's the monthly bills. Everything piled up. Malik's rent, my credit card. It's about $3,000. We need you to lend it to us." I looked at them both. There were my children. The children I had worked for until my back broke. The children for whom I had given up everything. The children who hadn't come to brunch with me on Mother's Day. But they came that very night to ask me for money. Something broke inside me at that moment, something that was never going to be put back together. I looked at them and thought about the envelope I had tucked away in my bedroom. The envelope with the bus ticket, the one-way ticket with no return. They didn't know yet. They didn't know that I had already made a decision. They didn't know that this was going to be the last time they saw me like this, quiet, submissive, available. They didn't know that everything was about to change, and while they continued talking about their problems, their debts, their needs, I only thought about one thing. My name is Vivian Sterling. I'm 70 years old and I already bought my one-way ticket. It wasn't always like this. There was a time when my children hugged me when they got home from school. A time when Tanisha ran to me yelling, "Mama," and clung to my neck. A time when Malik sought me out to tell me everything he had learned that day. There was a time when I was important to them. We were poor, but we were happy. Or at least, I thought we were happy. We lived in a small house on the edge of Cloverdale, Georgia. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen where the 4 of us barely fit. My husband Marcus worked construction. I cleaned houses. Between the 2 of us, we scraped together enough to eat and pay the rent. We didn't have anything left over, but we didn't go without either. The children were small. Tanisha was 6 years old. Malik was 4. They ran around the house barefoot. They played with rocks and sticks because we didn't have money for toys. But they didn't care. They were children. They were innocent. They didn't yet know that we were poor. They didn't yet know that other families had more. I bathed them every night in that old tub we had. I washed their hair carefully, trimmed their nails, put on the clean clothes I had washed by hand that afternoon, put them to bed, and told them stories until they fell asleep. They were my whole life. My reason for waking up every morning. Marcus was a good man, quiet, hardworking. He didn't talk much, but he loved me in his own way. He came home tired from work, sat at the table, and ate what I had prepared. Sometimes he looked at me and said, "Thank you, Vivian." That was enough for me. I didn't need more. But everything changed when Marcus died. It was an accident at the construction site. A beam fell wrong. He didn't suffer, they told me. It was quick, as if the speed of death made it hurt less, as if it were a comfort. He was 42 years old. I was 38. Tanisha was 12, and Malik was 10. Suddenly, I was alone with 2 children, no steady job, no savings, nothing more than my hands and my will to keep going. The survivor benefits they gave me after Marcus's death were pitiful, $500 a month. It wasn't enough even for food. So I worked. I worked like I had never worked in my life. I cleaned 3 houses in the morning, washed other people's clothes in the afternoon, ironed at night. I slept 4 hours if I was lucky. I got up before dawn, and I went to bed after midnight. My hands became calloused, my back started aching, my knees began to give out, but I didn't care because my children were okay. Because Tanisha and Malik had food on the table, because they could go to school, because they had clean clothes, because they had shoes, because they had a mother who would give her life for them. And I was ready to give it. Tanisha was the oldest, always more serious, more responsible. She helped me with Malik, looked after him when I had to work late, prepared dinner for him, and helped him with his homework. She was an adult child in a child's body, and I felt guilty about that, for robbing her of her childhood, for forcing her to grow up so fast. Malik was different, cheerful, a dreamer, always inventing things. He drew on any paper he could find. He told me that when he grew up, he was going to be an artist, that he was going to be famous, that he was going to buy me a big house, and that I would never have to work again. And I believed him, because mothers always believe their children. The years passed. They grew up. The house felt smaller and smaller. Tanisha started complaining. She said her friends had better things, better houses, better clothes, better lives. She looked at me with that silent reproach that hurt more than any word, as if it were my fault we were poor, as if I wasn't doing everything possible. Malik changed, too. He stopped drawing. He stopped dreaming. He started hanging out with other boys. He came home late and wouldn't tell me where he had been. When I asked, he answered in monosyllables. He became distant, cold, like a stranger living in my house. But I kept working, kept sacrificing myself, because that's what mothers do. Because I thought that someday they would understand, that someday they would be grateful, that someday they would tell me, "Thank you, Mama, for everything you did for us." When Tanisha turned 18, she got a job at a downtown store. She started earning her own money. I thought she would help me. I thought that now that she was working, I could rest a little, but no, Tanisha saved every cent. She bought new clothes, new shoes, makeup, perfumes. She went out with her friends, and when I asked her to contribute something to the house, she looked at me like I was asking for her kidney. Malik barely finished school. He didn't want to go to college. He said college wasn't for him, that he was going to get a job, that he was going to make money, and that he didn't need more education. I didn't insist. I was tired of fighting. I was tired of everything. He got a job at a mechanic's shop. He earned little, but it was something. I thought he would stay with me, that he would help me with expenses, but after 6 months, he told me he was moving out. He had found an apartment with some friends. He needed his space. He was a man now, and he couldn't stay living with me forever. I remained silent. I didn't tell him that I felt abandoned. I didn't tell him that I was afraid of being alone. I didn't say anything. I just helped him pack his things. I gave him money for the first month's rent, money I didn't have, money I took from my meager savings, and I watched him leave without looking back. Tanisha left 2 years later. She met a man, fell in love, and got married. She didn't invite me to the wedding. Well, she did invite me, but it was one of those obligatory invitations you make because you have to. I went to the wedding. I sat in a corner. No one talked to me. No one introduced me. No one made me feel important. I was just the mother of the bride, an afterthought, an obligation. Tanisha's marriage lasted 3 years. Then she divorced, came back to my house crying, telling me the man had cheated on her, that he had treated her badly, that she needed a place to stay. I took her in. Of course I took her in. She was my daughter. But she didn't thank me. She stayed for 6 months, recovered, met another man, and left again without saying goodbye. Malik never married. He had girlfriends, many girlfriends, all fleeting, all the same. He introduced them to me when he needed to impress them. "Look, this is my mama. Bless her heart, she lives alone, always so sacrificial." And they looked at me with pity, with that pity that makes you feel small, invisible, unnecessary. The years kept passing. I kept working, even though I couldn't clean houses like before, even though my back hurt so much that there were days I couldn't get out of bed, even though my hands trembled, even though my knees wouldn't hold me up. But they kept coming. Tanisha and Malik kept coming when they needed something. Money, almost always. $200 for rent, $300 for a debt, $500 for an emergency. They never quite explained. And I gave. I always gave, even if I had to skip buying my medicine, even if I had to eat less, even if I had to turn off the heat in winter to save, because they were my children, because I loved them, because I thought that someday they would change, that someday they would grow up, that someday they would realize everything I had done for them. But that day never came. And while I waited for that day, they kept taking, kept asking, kept forgetting about me until that Mother's Day. Until that day I sat in the empty living room, crying, waiting, slowly dying inside. And they arrived that night, smelling of partying and having fun, of a life I never had, and asked me for $3,000 as casually as asking for a glass of water. That's when something clicked in my head, when I understood that this was never going to change, that they were never going to change, that I could keep giving and giving until I dropped dead, and they would keep taking without thanks, without remembering, without loving. That night, I didn't give them the money. I told them I didn't have it. Tanisha got mad. She made that face she made when things didn't go her way. "But Mama, you always have something tucked away. You always help us. It can't be that right now. You have nothing." Her voice had that accusatory tone, as if I owed her something, as if it were my obligation to solve her life. Malik was more direct. "Ma, we seriously need this money. It's not a whim. These are real debts. If we don't pay, we're going to get into trouble." He looked at me, expecting me to give in. Because I always gave in. I always ended up giving them what they asked for, even if it left me with nothing. But this time, I didn't give in. I looked at them and told them no, that I didn't have that money, that I barely had enough to live on, that my Social Security check was only $1,200 a month, and that I had to pay for electricity, water, food, and medicine with that I had nothing left over, that I couldn't help them this time. Tanisha got up from the armchair and exhaled in frustration. "Unbelievable, Mama. Right now, when we really need you, you can't help us." Malik also stood up. "Well, then we'll have to figure it out some other way. Thanks anyway." His thank you sounded empty, fake, like everything that came out of his mouth lately. They left without saying goodbye, without asking how I was, without noticing that I had been crying all afternoon, without seeing the table I had set for them, without caring that it was Mother's Day and they had left me alone. They left and closed the door, and I stayed there again, in that empty living room, in that empty house, in that empty life. I stayed awake all night. I couldn't sleep. My mind wouldn't stop going over everything, the years, the sacrifices, the times I had gone without eating so they could eat, the times I had worked sick to pay for their school, the times I had given them even what I didn't have, and they didn't even remember. They weren't even grateful. To them, I was just an ATM, a place to come when they needed something, a resource, not a person, not their mother, just a source of money that should always be available. The next day, I got up early. I hadn't slept, but I got up anyway. I made myself a cup of coffee, sat in the kitchen, and made a decision. I was going to investigate. I was going to know the truth, because something didn't add up. Malik had a job. Tanisha did too. Both of them earned more than me. So why did they always need money? Where was all their income going? I opened my phone and went onto social media, something I almost never did because I didn't quite understand how those things worked. But Tanisha had shown me once. She had shown me how to search for people, how to see their photos. I searched for Tanisha's profile first, and there it all was. Photos and more photos. Tanisha in expensive restaurants. Tanisha in new dresses. Tanisha on trips to the beach. Tanisha at parties. Tanisha with drinks in her hand. Tanisha smiling. Tanisha living a life that, according to her, she couldn't afford. A life full of luxuries while she was asking me for rent money. I kept scrolling. More photos, more restaurants, more clothes, more trips, posts from a week ago, 2 days ago, yesterday, last night. A picture from the party she went to instead of coming to brunch with me. She was with her friends, all made up, all in fancy clothes. The description read, "Perfect day with my favorites. Hearts, emojis, happiness. A perfect day." While I was crying alone in my house, while I was waiting for them to come, while I was saving the food no one was going to eat. A perfect day. I searched for Malik's profile. More of the same. Photos at bars, photos with friends, photos with new motorcycles, photos in designer clothes, photos at concerts, photos at events. A full life. An expensive life. A life that didn't match someone who couldn't pay his bills. I stared at those photos for hours. I felt a strange feeling in my chest. It wasn't just sadness. It was something deeper. It was the feeling of having been cheated, of having been used, of having been foolish for all those years. Then I saw something that chilled my blood, a group chat. Tanisha had accidentally posted a screenshot, or maybe not accidentally. Maybe she didn't care who saw it. It was a group called the Sterling Kids. It was just the two of them, Tanisha and Malik. The screenshot showed part of a conversation. Malik had written, "Did you ask the old woman yet?" Tanisha replied, "Not yet, but I know how I'm going to work her. I'll tell her it's urgent. You know how she is. She always falls for it." Malik, LOL. Yeah, poor thing. But hey, that's what she had us for, right? To take care of her when she's old, and in the meantime, she can fund us a little longer. I read that once, twice, 3 times. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The old woman, poor thing, fund us a little longer. That's how they talked about me. That's what they thought of me. As a burden, as a future obligation, as someone to make fun of. In the meantime, I closed the phone. My hands were shaking. I felt nauseous. I got up and went to the bathroom. I looked at myself in the mirror. I saw a 70-year-old woman, tired, worn out, with deep wrinkles, completely white hair, sad eyes, hands deformed from working so much. This was me, Vivian Sterling, the woman who had given her whole life for 2 children who called her the old woman. The woman who had broken her back working so they could have everything she never had. The woman who kept giving them money while they mocked her in their private chats. I went back to my bedroom and opened the drawer of my nightstand. I took out an old box where I kept important papers, documents, receipts, and proof of payments. I started reviewing everything. I mentally tallied up how much money I had given them over the last 5 years. $20,000. In 5 years, I had given them $20,000. Money I took from my Social Security check, money I saved by not buying things for myself, money I borrowed and was still paying back, $20,000 that they spent on parties, clothes, trips, and whims, while telling me it was for emergencies, for urgent debts, for necessities. They lied to me. They had always lied to me, and I had always believed them, because that's what foolish mothers do, believe their children even when all the signs say they shouldn't. I put the papers away, closed the box, and sat on the edge of my bed. In that moment, I understood something fundamental. If I didn't change this, no one would. They were never going to wake up one day and decide to treat me better. They were never going to be grateful. They were never going to appreciate me. They were never going to love me as I loved them. I had 2 options. Continue like this until I died. Keep being the old woman they fund. Keep giving them everything until I had nothing left, until I died alone and forgotten in this house, while they continued with their perfect lives, posting happy photos online. Or I could do something different, something I had never done, something that scared me just to think about. I could choose myself for the first time in 70 years. I could think about me. I could do something for me. I got up, went to the living room, and turned on the old computer I had, the one Malik had given me years ago when it was too slow for him. I went online and searched for retirement communities near the coast. I don't know why I searched for that. Maybe because I had always dreamed of seeing the ocean, of living near the water, of hearing the waves, of feeling the breeze, things I never did because I was always too busy giving my life to others. Several results popped up. Quiet places, communities for older adults, small but respectable homes, affordable prices. Far from this city, far from this life, far from them. I wrote down some numbers, some names, some addresses. I turned off the computer, and there, sitting in the room where I had cried the day before, I started planning something I never thought I would do. I started planning my escape, my freedom, my new life. A life where Vivian Sterling wouldn't be the old woman, where she wouldn't be the funder, where she wouldn't be the forgotten mother. A life where I could simply be Vivian, a woman, a person, someone who matters. But first, I needed to know more. I needed to understand exactly how deep the deception went. I needed to see with my own eyes who my children really were. So I decided to do something I had never done. I decided to investigate them, follow them, and observe them without their knowledge. I called Eleanor. Eleanor Johnson, my old neighbor, the only person in this world who still treated me like a human being. I had helped her years ago when her husband died. I lent her money, I gave her food, I comforted her in her grief, and she never forgot it. Unlike my own children, Ellie knew how to be grateful. Ellie answered on the second ring. "Vivian, it is good to hear your voice. How are you?" Her voice was warm, real. We talked for a while. I told her a little, not everything. I couldn't tell her everything. I asked her for a favor. I needed her to help me get information. I needed to know where my children were going, what they were doing, and who they were with. Ellie didn't ask why. She just said, "Count on me." We arranged to meet the next day. That night, I slept a little better. Not because I was calm, but because for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had a purpose, a plan, a direction. I was no longer just the woman who waited. Now, I was the woman who acted. Ellie came to my house the next morning. She brought coffee and pastries. She sat with me at the kitchen table and listened. I told her everything. I showed her the screenshots I had saved. I showed her the receipts for the money I had given them. I showed her the photos on social media. Everything. Ellie listened in silence. When I finished, she just took my hand and said, "Vivian, this has to end." And I knew she was right. It had to end, but not just any way. It had to end the right way, a way that would give me back my dignity. Ellie knew people. She had contacts. Her nephew worked at a law firm. She told me she could get me an appointment, that he could help me organize my things, my papers, my money, my life. I accepted. 3 days later, I was sitting in an office across from a young lawyer. His name was Avery Jones. He was about 35. He was serious but kind. He offered me water and asked me to tell him my situation, and I talked. I talked more than I had talked in years. I told him about my children, about the money, about the lies, about how they treated me. I showed him everything I had collected. He took notes. He asked questions, questions no one had ever asked me, questions about me, about what I wanted, about what I needed. Avery explained several things to me. He explained that I was not obligated to give my children money, that they were adults responsible for their own lives, that I had the right to live peacefully, that I could do whatever I wanted with my money, my house, and my time. He talked to me about wills, bank accounts, and inheritance. He told me I could change everything, that I could protect the little I had, that I could make sure that when I died my things would go to whoever I decided, not necessarily my children. That conversation opened my eyes. I had never thought about those things. I always assumed that everything I had belonged to them, that when I died they would inherit, that was the natural order. But Avery made me understand that I could decide, that I was still alive, that I still had a voice, that I still had power. I asked him how much his services cost. He gave me a price, $500 for all the paperwork. It was a lot of money for me, more than I had available. But Ellie had lent me the money. She told me to pay her back when I could, or not to pay her back at all, that the important thing was for me to be okay. I hired Avery that same day. He asked for documents, deeds, bank papers, and receipts. I told him I would bring him everything. We agreed to meet the following week to start the process. I left that office feeling different, stronger, clearer, as if someone had turned on a light in a dark room where I had been living my whole life. Now I could see things as they were, not as I wanted them to be. That night I reviewed all my documents, the house deed, my old will, my bank accounts, my pension. Everything was in order, but nothing was the way I wanted it. The old will said everything went to Tanisha and Malik in equal parts, the house, the money, everything, as if they deserved it, as if they had done something to earn it. I decided that was going to change, but not yet. First, I needed to observe more, understand more, see how far their lying went, how deep their disrespect was. I needed to be completely sure before making decisions I couldn't reverse. I started following them discreetly, like an amateur detective. I knew where Malik worked and I knew where Tanisha lived. I started passing by those places, observing, taking mental notes. I saw Malik leave the mechanic's shop one Tuesday afternoon. He wasn't alone. He was with a young woman, very young, maybe 25 years old. They got into a new car, a car I didn't recognize, an expensive car. They drove off together, laughing, holding hands. I followed them on the bus. They went to a downtown restaurant, one of those places where the plates run $50. I watched them go in. I saw them sit next to the window. I saw them order wine. I watched as Malik showed her the menu, how he smiled at her, how he treated her like she was someone special. My son, who told me he couldn't pay his rent, was spending $100 on dinner. My son, who was asking me to borrow money, was in a new car. My son, who was supposedly broke, was living like he was swimming in money. I stayed outside the restaurant. I waited. I don't know why I waited. Maybe because I needed to see more. I needed to confirm what I already knew. They came out 2 hours later, still laughing, still happy. They kissed on the street, got into the car, and left. I returned home on the last bus of the night. I arrived tired, sad, but also surer, more convinced that what I was doing was right. The next day was Tanisha's turn. I knew she worked at an office in the mall. I went early. I sat on a bench outside her job. I waited. I saw her leave at lunchtime. She was with 2 friends, the same ones from the photos on social media. They went to a clothing store. I followed them. I went into the store behind them. I stood looking at the racks while I listened to them talk. Tanisha tried on a red dress. It cost $200. Her friends told her it looked beautiful, that she should buy it. She hesitated for a moment, then said, "Yes, I'm taking it. I already paid off the debts anyway. Now I can treat myself." She already paid off the debts. The debts she asked me for $3,000 for 2 weeks ago. The debts that supposedly had her desperate. She had already paid them and was now buying a $200 dress like it was nothing. I left the store before them. I didn't want them to see me. I didn't want to confront them yet. It wasn't the right time. I went back home. I sat in my room and took out an old notebook I had. I started writing down everything I had seen, the dates, the places, the expenses, the lies. I called Avery the next day and told him what I had discovered. He listened to me. He said that all of it was useful, that it would help me make better decisions. He asked me if I was sure about what I wanted to do. I told him yes, surer than ever. We started the process. Avery drafted a new will, one where I decided who inherited what. He prepared documents to change the beneficiaries of my bank account. He prepared everything so that when I died, my children would not automatically receive anything, or they would receive the minimum, whatever I decided to give them. But we also talked about something else. We talked about what to do while I was alive. Avery suggested I open a new account, an account my children didn't know about, where I could keep my money, where they couldn't ask me because they wouldn't know it existed. I did exactly that. I opened an account at a different bank. I transferred most of my pension to that new account. I left only the minimum in the old account, just enough to make it seem like I barely had enough to live on, which was true. But now I had a little saved. A little that was only mine. A little that no one was going to take from me. I also started selling things. Old things I had in the house. Furniture I no longer used. Clothes that no longer fit me. Books, dishes, things I had accumulated over 50 years of life. I sold them online with the help of Ellie, who understood those things better than I did. It wasn't much money, 50 here, 100 there, but it added up. I saved every cent in my new account, my secret account, my escape fund, because that was what I was planning, an escape, a way out, a way to disappear from this life that was slowly killing me. Every day that passed, I was surer. I didn't want to continue like this anymore. I didn't want to be the mother who begged for crumbs of affection. I didn't want to be the old woman who funds them. I looked up bus tickets. I looked up distant destinations, places where no one knew me, where I could start over, where Vivian Sterling could be someone different, someone free. I found a coastal town about 600 miles from here, a small, quiet place with cheap houses, with a view of the sea, with that ocean I always wanted to see. The ticket cost $70, one way. I saved that information. I hadn't bought it yet, but I knew I would soon. In the meantime, I kept pretending. I kept being the same Vivian as always when Tanisha or Malik called, which was rare. Very rare. 2 weeks passed without hearing from them. Not a call, not a text, nothing, as if I didn't exist, as if I had died and no one had noticed. But I was fine. For the first time in a long time, I was fine being alone, because I knew that loneliness was temporary, because I knew I was doing something, that I was taking control, that I was building something new. Ellie came to visit me often. We drank coffee. We talked. She told me about her grandchildren, about her life. I told her about my plans. She supported me. She told me I was doing the right thing, that I deserved to be happy, that I deserved to live for myself. One day, she said something that stuck with me. Vivian, you gave 50 years of your life for them. Now it's time for you to give yourself at least 10 years for you, before it's too late. And she was right. I was 70 years old. If I was lucky, I had 10 or 15 more years left. And I wanted to live them, truly live them. Not just exist, waiting for my children to remember that I had a name. I signed the new papers with Avery, the new will, the bank documents, everything legal, everything in order. He gave me copies. He explained that now everything was protected, that I had done the right thing. He shook my hand as we said goodbye. He told me, "Take good care of yourself, Mrs. Sterling. You deserve the best." I left that office feeling light, as if a weight had been lifted off me, a weight of years, of decades, of a lifetime carrying guilt that wasn't mine. That night, I sat in front of the computer. I bought the ticket, a bus ticket, one way, destination, Coastal Haven. A town I didn't even know, but that would soon be my home. The departure date, in 2 months, enough time to organize everything, to tie up loose ends, to say goodbye to this life without making a sound. The ticket was tucked away in the drawer of my nightstand. I looked at it every night before sleeping. It was my reminder, my promise, my hope. In 2 months, I would leave here. In 2 months, I would be free. But before leaving, I needed to do something. I needed them to know. I needed them to understand what they had done. Not for revenge, not for hate, but for dignity, out of respect for myself, for all the mothers who keep quiet and endure until they can't anymore. I told Ellie my plan. She looked at me with those wise eyes of hers. She asked me if I was sure. I told her yes. She asked me if I wouldn't regret it later. I told her that the only thing I regretted was taking so long. Ellie helped me plan everything. We decided I would have a dinner, a last supper. I would invite Tanisha and Malik. I would tell them I had something important to announce. They would come. Of course they would come. They would think I was going to give them something. Money, the house, something. They always thought I was going to give them something. But this time it would be me who took. I would take my life back. I would take my dignity back. I would take my name back. We set the date. Saturday in 3 weeks. Enough time to prepare everything, enough time to ensure I wouldn't back out. I called Tanisha first. She answered on the 4th ring. "Hello, Mama. What's going on?" Her voice sounded distracted, as always. I told her I wanted to have a family dinner, that it had been a long time since the 3 of us had gotten together, that I had something important to tell them. There was a silence. Then she asked, "Is it something bad, Mama? Are you sick?" Her concern sounded fake, practiced. I told her no, that I wasn't sick, that I just wanted to see them, that I wanted to talk to them, that it was important. She accepted. She said she would be there. I hung up and called Malik. The conversation was almost identical. He also accepted. He also asked if I was sick. He also sounded like he was doing something else while talking to me. But they confirmed. Both of them said they would come. I marked the date on the calendar. 3 weeks. 21 days, 504 hours. I started counting backward. During those 3 weeks, I prepared everything meticulously. I made a list of what I needed to tell them, what I needed to show them, and how the evening would unfold. I rehearsed it in front of the mirror. I practiced my voice, my tone, my words. I wanted to be sure. I wanted to be firm. I also prepared the evidence. I printed the screenshots from their social media, the conversations where they mocked me, the photos of their luxurious lives while they asked me for money, the receipts for all the money I had given them over the last 5 years. Everything organized, everything numbered, everything ready to show them. Avery prepared official documents for me, a letter where I declared that I was withdrawing all financial support from my children, that they would not receive another cent from me, that they had to fend for themselves, that they were adults, and it was time for them to act like it.